She was sleeping on a bench in Central Station. No job. No home. Her father dying in a hospital bed she couldn't afford to keep him in. But in less than 12 hours, she'd be standing in the bedroom of one of the wealthiest men in America. And what happened that night? It would destroy both their lives in ways neither of them saw coming. This is the story of how one desperate decision turned into a national scandal, a legal war, and a mystery that still haunts the people who lived through it. Because what started as a transaction became something far more complicated, and what seemed like survival became a fight for justice that would expose secrets powerful people wanted buried forever. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, 25 years old. She'd been homeless for 8 months when this story begins. But that wasn't always her life. 3 years earlier, Sarah was a nursing student at Columbia University. Top of her class. Scholarship recipient. Everyone said she had a future. She volunteered at free clinics on weekends, worked part-time at a coffee shop near campus, and called her father every Sunday without fail. Her dad, Robert Mitchell, had raised her alone after her mother died when Sarah was 9. He was a construction worker, hands worn from decades of labor, but his smile? That never faded. He used to tell her, "You're going to be the first Mitchell to wear a white coat, baby girl. I'll be right there in the front row when you graduate." But life doesn't always care about plans. In her junior year, Robert collapsed on a job site. Doctors found stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim. 6 months, maybe less. But he could have more time with aggressive treatment. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental drugs. The hospital estimated it would cost over $400,000, and Robert's insurance? It covered barely a fraction. Sarah made a choice that day. She dropped out of school, sold everything she owned, moved back home to take care of him. She worked 3 jobs trying to keep up with the bills. Waitressing in the morning, cleaning offices at night, doing delivery runs whenever she could. But cancer doesn't wait for you to catch up. The medical debt piled higher. 15,000 became 30. 30 became 60. Then they lost the apartment. Robert was too weak to work, and Sarah couldn't earn fast enough to cover rent and treatment. So they ended up in a city shelter. And when even that became too expensive to navigate, Sarah found herself on the streets, visiting her father in a hospital ward for the uninsured, where the care was minimal and the hope even less. She kept a journal during those months. One entry, dated February 14th, read, "Dad asked me today if I was eating enough. He can barely swallow, and he's worried about me. I lied and said yes. I haven't eaten a real meal in 3 days. I don't know how much longer I can do this. I don't know how to save him. I don't know how to save myself." That was the version of Sarah Mitchell the world didn't see. The girl who sat in hospital hallways at 2 in the morning because she had nowhere else to go. The girl who washed her only pair of jeans in public restrooms and slept with her backpack clutched to her chest because it held everything she owned. Her phone, her father's medical records, a photo of her mom, and a pocket knife just in case. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. One night in early March, Sarah was sitting outside a diner where she used to work before they let her go. She wasn't begging. She just sat there, staring at nothing, trying to figure out her next move. That's when an old friend from her waitressing days walked up. Her name was Jenna. They hadn't spoken in months. Jenna looked different now. Designer bag, new coat, hair done. She sat down next to Sarah without saying a word for a minute, then finally spoke. "I heard about your dad. I'm sorry." Sarah just nodded. Jenna reached into her purse, pulled out a business card, and placed it on the bench between them. No name on it, just a phone number. "There are people who can help," Jenna said quietly. "People with money who are willing to pay for certain things. Discretion. Companionship. One night, no questions, and you walk away with enough to cover what you need." Sarah stared at the card like it was a live grenade. "I'm not talking about what you think," Jenna continued. "It's not illegal. It's just transactional. You meet someone. You spend time with them. You sign something saying you'll never talk about it. And they pay you. A lot. Sarah's stomach turned. How much? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jenna looked her in the eye. Enough to save your father. Sarah didn't call the number that night. Or the next. She told herself she wouldn't. That she'd find another way. But 2 days later, the hospital called. Her father's condition had worsened. They needed to start the next round of treatment immediately, or he'd be moved to palliative care. That meant letting him die. Sarah sat on the steps of a subway station, staring at that business card, and she made the call. A woman answered.
Calm.
Professional. No judgment in her voice. She asked Sarah a few questions.
Age.
Appearance. Availability. Then she said, There's someone interested. Tomorrow night. Hotel Carlisle. 8th floor, Suite 14. Wear something simple. Bring your ID. You'll sign an agreement, and the payment will be wired before you leave the room. Sarah's hands were shaking. How much? The woman paused. $500,000. The next evening, Sarah stood outside the Hotel Carlisle in Midtown Manhattan. It was the kind of place she'd only seen in movies. Chandeliers in the lobby. Marble floors. Doormen in tailored suits. She didn't belong there, and every person who looked at her seemed to know it. She took the elevator to the 8th floor, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs.
Suite 14.
She knocked. The door opened, and standing there was a man who looked nothing like what she'd imagined. His name, she'd later learn, was Ethan Crane. 42 years old. Billionaire tech investor. He'd made his fortune in software acquisitions and private equity. You wouldn't recognize his face unless you followed business journals. He kept a low profile. No social media. Rare interviews. But his wealth was undeniable. And his reputation? Complicated. Ethan didn't smile when he opened the door. He just stepped aside and let her in. The suite was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A bottle of wine on the table, untouched. He gestured to the couch. Sit. Sarah sat.
He didn't.
He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the skyline. You understand what this is? He asked, not turning around. She nodded, even though he wasn't looking. I need you to say it, he said. Yes, Sarah whispered. I understand. He turned then, studying her for a long moment. You'll sign a non-disclosure agreement. You won't speak about this night to anyone. Not your family. Not a lawyer. Not the press. If you do, you'll be sued for everything you'll ever make for the rest of your life. Do you understand? She nodded again. He pulled out a folder from the desk, slid it across the table. Read it. Sign it. Then we'll proceed. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up the papers. Legalese filled every page. Words like confidentiality, breach, irreparable harm, liquidated damages. She didn't understand half of it, but she saw the number at the bottom. $500,000. To be wired within 24 hours of contract execution.
She signed.
He took the papers, didn't even glance at them, and placed them back in the folder. Then he poured 2 glasses of wine, handed her one. You don't have to drink it, he said. She didn't.
He did.
They sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then he said, You can leave whenever you want, but the money only transfers if you stay till morning. So she stayed. What happened that night isn't something Sarah ever described in detail. Not to the lawyers. Not to the media. Not even in her journal. But what she did write, weeks later, was this. I felt like I sold a piece of myself I'll never get back. Not my body. Something deeper. My sense of who I was. And I don't know if I'll ever feel whole again. When the sun came up, Ethan was already dressed. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a receipt. Proof of wire transfer. $500,000 deposited into an account under her name. He walked her to the door. Forget this happened, he said. Move on with your life. And then she left. Sarah paid for her father's treatment that same day. The hospital staff looked at her like she'd won the lottery. In a way she had. But it didn't feel like winning. Robert started his next round of chemo within 48 hours. His color improved. His appetite came back a little. For a few weeks, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, he'd beat it. Sarah rented a small studio apartment in Queens. Nothing fancy, but it had a bed and a lock on the door. She started sleeping through the night again. She even looked into re-enrolling in school. For the first time in months, she let herself hope. But 2 months later, Robert took a turn. The cancer had spread to his liver. The doctors said there was nothing more they could do. He passed away on a Tuesday morning in May, with Sarah holding his hand. He was 61 years old. His last words to her were, "You gave me time, baby girl." That's all I ever wanted. She buried him in a modest cemetery in Brooklyn. The funeral was small. Just her, a few of his old co-workers, and a pastor who didn't really know him. Sarah stood at the grave long after everyone else had left, staring at the dirt, wondering if any of it had been worth it. 3 weeks after the funeral, Sarah realized she'd missed her period. At first, she didn't think much of it. Stress could do that. Grief could do that. But when it happened again, she bought a test. And then another. And another. All positive. She was pregnant. The father? There was no question. Ethan Crane was the only man she'd been with in over a year. Panic set in. The NDA. The contract. She couldn't contact him. She couldn't tell anyone. If she did, she'd lose everything. She'd be sued into oblivion. But she was carrying his child. And she had no idea what to do. Sarah scheduled an abortion. Twice. Both times, she sat in the waiting room and couldn't go through with it. Not because of any moral stance, but because this baby was the only thing she had left that felt like it mattered. Her father was gone. Her old life was gone. But this was something. She decided to keep it. She'd figure it out. She always did. The pregnancy was difficult. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion that made it hard to function. She picked up freelance work online, anything she could do from home. Graphic design, data entry, transcription. Enough to pay rent and buy groceries. She didn't tell anyone she was pregnant. She just disappeared into herself, waiting for the months to pass. In her 7th month, Sarah went in for a routine ultrasound. The technician's face changed while looking at the screen. She called in the doctor. They ran more tests. And that's when they told her. The baby had a rare genetic disorder. Cystic fibrosis. It's only possible if both parents carry the recessive gene. The odds of 2 random people both being carriers? About 1 in 2,500. The doctor asked if the father had been tested. Sarah said no. The doctor suggested genetic counseling, asked for the father's medical history. Sarah refused to give it. But a social worker at the clinic flagged the case. Young, single mother. Unclear paternity. Genetic anomaly. It raised questions. And questions in the wrong hands become investigations. Someone leaked Sarah's name to a blogger who covered stories about wealth and corruption. The blogger dug. Found the wire transfer. Found Ethan Crane's name attached to the account. Published a post titled, "Did a billionaire pay a homeless woman for S*X and disappear when she got pregnant?" It went viral. Within 48 hours, Sarah's face was on the internet. News outlets picked it up. Billionaire's secret baby. Tech mogul accused of exploiting vulnerable woman. The story exploded. Sarah's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters camped outside her apartment. She stopped answering the door. Ethan Crane's lawyers released a statement. Mr. Crane categorically denies any ongoing relationship with the individual in question. He has no knowledge of any child and disputes any claims of paternity. This appears to be an unfortunate attempt at extortion. The public turned on Sarah. Half called her a gold digger. The other half called her a victim. No one seemed to care what the truth actually was. She gave birth in November. A baby girl. 6 pounds, 3 ounces. Sarah named her Grace, after her grandmother. Grace was born with cystic fibrosis, just as the doctors predicted. She'd need lifelong care, medications, therapy, hospitalizations. It would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions. And Sarah was alone. A lawyer named Monica Delgado reached out. She'd been following the case. She specialized in family law and exploitation cases. She offered to represent Sarah pro bono. "We can sue for paternity and child support," Monica said. Even if he denies it, we can compel a DNA test. Sarah hesitated. The NDA. The NDA doesn't protect him from a court order, Monica explained. Especially if a child's welfare is at stake. Contracts can't void parental responsibility. So Sarah agreed. They filed a lawsuit. Ethan Crane versus Sarah Mitchell. Paternity and child support claim. The media frenzy intensified. The DNA test came back 6 weeks later. The results were conclusive. Ethan Crane was not the biological father. Sarah's world collapsed. She didn't understand. There was no one else. It didn't make sense. But the science was clear. Ethan's lawyers moved to dismiss the case immediately. They demanded Sarah be charged with fraud. Monica dug deeper. And that's when things got strange. Buried in the NDA Sarah had signed was a clause. Section 12, subsection E. It stated, in the event that pregnancy occurs as a result of interactions covered under this agreement, the signatory party agrees to assume full financial and legal responsibility for any resulting offspring, including but not limited to medical care, education, and support, regardless of biological verification. It was written in legal jargon so dense that most people would skip right over it. But what it meant was this. Ethan Crane had contractually agreed to be financially responsible for any child that resulted from that night, even if he wasn't the biological father. Monica called it a parental responsibility trap. And it was enforceable. Ethan's legal team went ballistic. They claimed the clause was inserted without his knowledge, that Sarah and her lawyer had conspired to defraud him. But Monica pulled phone records, emails, meeting logs. She found something else. 7 other women. All had signed similar NDAs with Ethan Crane over the past decade. All had received payments between $300,000 and $1 million. And all had clauses nearly identical to Sarah's. One of the women, a woman named Vanessa Torres, had tried to come forward 2 years earlier. She'd contacted a journalist, ready to talk. But before the story ran, she vanished. Her last text to the reporter read, "They found me. I'm not safe." She was never heard from again. Her case was still open. Missing person. No leads. Monica brought this evidence to the court. The judge ordered a full investigation. Federal authorities got involved. The case was no longer just about child support. It was about whether Ethan Crane had been running a coordinated scheme to exploit vulnerable women, binding them into legal agreements that gave him control over their lives and potential offspring. The media called it the Billionaire breeding scandal. Ethan disappeared from public view. His lawyers stonewalled. His assets were frozen pending investigation. Protests erupted outside his corporate offices. Survivors groups rallied around Sarah. She became a symbol, not of victimhood, but of resistance. The trial lasted 4 months. Sarah testified. So did 2 of the other women who'd signed NDAs. Their stories were hauntingly similar. Desperate situations, large payments, ironclad contracts, and lives that were never the same. Ethan Crane took the stand once. He was calm, cold. He claimed every interaction was consensual, every contract legal, every payment justified. "I did nothing wrong," he said. "I help people in need. If they regret their choices, that's not my responsibility." The jury didn't buy it. In March, the court ruled in Sarah's favor. Ethan Crane was ordered to pay $8 million in child support, medical care, and damages. The other women were awarded settlements as well. His reputation was destroyed. His business partners distanced themselves. Investors pulled out. Within weeks, his empire began to crumble. But Sarah didn't feel victorious. She felt exhausted. She'd won the case, but Grace still needed round-the-clock care. The money would help, but it wouldn't bring back the years she'd lost. It wouldn't undo the trauma. And it wouldn't answer the one question that still haunted her. How did this happen? Months later, Monica discovered something that changed everything. The DNA test that showed Ethan wasn't Grace's father? It had been accurate. But Sarah hadn't lied. Genetic testing revealed that Sarah herself was a chimera, someone with 2 sets of DNA, due to absorbing a twin in the womb. The baby's DNA came from Sarah's secondary genetic line, which didn't match the samples originally taken from Sarah during the trial. It was an anomaly so rare that most doctors never see it in their careers. Grace was Sarah's biological daughter. And the genetic markers that suggested a second parent? They came from Sarah's own absorbed twin DNA. Ethan Crane had never been the father. But because of the contract he signed, he was still legally and financially responsible. When this revelation went public, the case became even stranger. Ethan's lawyers tried to use it to overturn the ruling, but the judge upheld the original decision. The contract was clear, she said. Intent matters. And Mr. Crane's pattern of behavior suggests intent to exploit. Ethan Crane stopped fighting. He paid the settlement. And then, 3 months later, his body was found in a private villa in Monaco. The official report said suicide. Gunshot wound. No note. But people close to the case, including Monica, didn't believe it. Men like him don't kill themselves, she said in an interview. They run. They hide. They reinvent. But they don't just end it. An investigation was opened, then quietly closed. No suspects. No answers. Sarah moved out of New York. She took Grace to a small town in Oregon, far from the cameras and the headlines. She used the settlement money to start a nonprofit. It helps homeless women access medical care, legal aid, and housing. She called it Grace's Place. And every year on the anniversary of that night at the Hotel Carlisle, she writes a letter. Not to Ethan. Not to the lawyers. But to her younger self. The girl on the bench. The girl who didn't think she had a choice. You survived. One letter read. You did what you had to do. And you turned it into something that matters. I'm proud of you. So what really happened that night? Was Sarah a victim who fought back? Was Ethan a predator who got what he deserved? Or was it something more complicated? Something that doesn't fit neatly into a headline? The truth is, we may never know the whole story. But what we do know is this: Sarah Mitchell didn't let that one night define her. She took the worst moment of her life and turned it into a fight for others who had no voice. And Grace? She's 7 years old now. Healthy, thanks to the care her mother fought for. Curious. Kind. And she has no idea yet how much her mom sacrificed to give her a chance. What do you think? Was this justice or was it something else? Could you have made the same choice Sarah did? And what do you believe really happened to Ethan Crane? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if this story made you think, made you feel something, hit that subscribe button, because stories like this, real stories that show the complexity of human choices, those are the stories we're going to keep bringing you.